Welcome to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews, and convention panels. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, assigned to Ragnarok Story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and RPGpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
So we are here to discuss the works and world of Neil Gaiman. We're going to step in between worlds as we discuss the extensive body of work created by Neil Gaiman. We'll wax poetic over our favorite stories, share recommendations for new and old fans, talk about the worlds that exist that you can barely see from the corner of your eye, with Aziraphale and Crowley as one of the best ships ever. So, and with that, I'd like to kick off with introductions. I'm here with the Rhoynish Turtle Society and the Hut Slayer conglomerate. I am the actor who plays Madame Askew on TV. If you're like, wait, I thought you were English. Yes, professionally. The rest of the time I'm not. So I go by Madame Askew, but you can also call me Jocelyn. What's going on?
Oh, she forgot her card.
Oh, no.
I am Jen. I've been with the Rhoynish Turtle Conservation Society since, 10 years ago. We've been doing panels about Game of Thrones because nobody wants another turtle war. So it's very important we keep Mother Rhoyne in shape with the turtles, and I'll pass it along to my other industry here.
Hi, my name is Tanya, and I just found my little card.
No, she's not bringing you treat.
Yeah, we enjoy these panels where we kind of deep dive into some of our favorite pop culture and nerdy topics. Mm-hmm. We got our start with Game of Thrones, and then we realized, hey, we can talk about other things, and people might actually want to hear it. And if they don't, well, they can leave. We got started down here in TusCon. Like Jen and I often do panels in Phoenix with other folks. So we just sort of dubbed ourselves the TusCon delegation, and then we're joined with wonderful friends. So yeah, today we're going to talk about Neil Gaiman.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Friends.
Yeah,
I Wendy Trakes. I'm big fan of Neil Gaiman stuff. I've been coming to TusCon for almost 40 years. This is my first year being on panels. I hope I can do more. This is the last working with these guys. And yeah, I'm excited about this topic. It's one of my favorite authors. Cool. We're trying to live stream.
Yeah, you guys continue without me, and I'll be right back up there. I'm just right here. I'm just faffing about. Don't mind me.
Well, but you tell us all about your favorites, Jocelyn.
Can we come back to
You should probably spoiler warn too.
before that, I would like to give a spoiler warning that we may end up discussing points and characters from like Good Omens seasons 1 and 2 and the Sandman series on Netflix, and not to mention, many other Gaiman works. So if there's things that like you haven't read yet or you haven't seen yet, and you don't, just be warned, there may be spoilers ahead for you.
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about my favorites, and I'm very excited to talk about them, as you can see. And I'm also deeply distracted right now trying to make this happen. But I believe I put Neverwhere and...
You put Stardust and American Gods.
Oh, Stardust and American Gods.
And Another Boys.
Holy Trinity.
Honestly, the deal is, I love all of Gaiman. Who doesn't? Who's in this room? Who's amongst us? But we had to choose because we all love so much. And I'm a steampunk in my professional life. And so Stardust is kind of a gimme, honestly. It's maybe not like total steampunk, but there's an airship. And for me, that's good enough. Good enough. The other thing is, like, the movie sort of like catapults it even more into that kind of steampunk vibe for me. So part of it is I just love the historicity, the sort of fantastical quality of it, and this kind of idea that comes up again and again in Gaiman of like, we're going to toy with mythology. We're going to delve into your expectations of mythology. We're going to get really close to urban fantasy. Oh, thanks, Neil. For me, how kind. I love it. But it's going to be set, like, 150, 200 years ago, just to shake it up. I'm like, sounds good. I will take this trip with you. And so I love that he comes back to the mythology and toying with our understandings of it and using this kind of voice that he has. It's so poetic, so lyrical, and also has a real poignance and humanity to it. So I never feel like he's being precious with his words. And for me in Stardust, that's sort of really on the show, because it's like, would be really possible to dive into this kind of like, oh, I'm using 19th century English, and it's very pretentious, and I clearly read Dickens. And I'm like, yeah, have you read an editor? So, but he manages to like avoid that, and it's beautiful. So but my other favorite that I chose for the purposes of being here is American Gods, and that was my first Gaiman. Really? That was the first thing I read by him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I didn't enter through Sandman. It wasn't a Metallica experience for me. I came in through, something about mythology and modern America. Ooh, I date that. Sounds good. And I was absolutely blown away. I've given away so many copies of that book that I just keep used copies at home to give to people. Because I'm like, look, you won't give it back. So, yes, I know there's a TV show, but start with the book. It's so good. I mean, I like some things about the TV show. I think we're going to talk about adaptations. But it was the book for me. It was always that book. And it's so complicated, so deep, and the characters feel so human, even the mythological characters, which to me is absolutely a power of Gaiman, that he is able to take these really, legendary figures that seem beyond humanity and pull them in and be like, you know what, really, he's just a bad dad who's a deadbeat, doesn't want to pay his bills, definitely never did the dishes, and probably did not get his dirty clothes into the hamper. And he's just like the dad who takes you for the weekend trip to the amusement park and is like, isn't that fine? And you're like, no, pay for my therapy. Come on. And he's like, but I'm Odin. And it's like, yeah, pay for a lot of therapy. And so I love that. I love that dynamic. I love the sort of cheekiness, and the twists are also great. I didn't always see those twists coming, which was absolutely such a treat because I'm a massive reader. So, an obvious twist. I'm like, I still like you, but I saw it 100 pages ago. It's fine. It's fine. That's what happens if that's all you do is read and make costumes. So, anyway, I think that is a good summation of where I'm at with those two books. So, up next we've got Tanya, who's also gonna bring us into some American Gods. But.
Yeah. Two of my favorites from Gaiman. Well, actually, two of my favorites from him are the first book that I read that was from him and Terry Pratchett was Good Omens. I had never read either author. And it was actually Mike suggested, because I was looking for a gift for my husband, and we both love to read, so he's like, I think this would be a good one, and then we both enjoyed it. And it's funny, it's a lot of fun because it actually is a really good kind of introduction to both of their styles, because they did write it together, like long distance through sending things and faxes, and but it's the most fun thing about it is once you start reading their individual works and you go back and you reread Good Omens, you can spot who wrote what.
Oh.
And it's so much fun. And another one of my favorites is American Gods. And I mean, I almost sometimes think of it as a controversial choice because I've met people who I was like, oh yeah, American Gods is great. And they'd never read Gaiman and they read American Gods and they were like, I don't think I ever want to read anything he's written again. And so I'm like, maybe I'll stop recommending that if they've never read Neil Gaiman. But I like it for many of the reasons that you said. Like there's that deep mythology, and it's kind of back like whenever you read some of like the old like Greek myths and stuff, the gods are just as petty and awful as humans, and and that's how they act. And it's funny too, like just to make this, I know we're here to celebrate Gaiman, just to like, if I could be just a little tiny bit serious, I was reading American Gods for the first time, and I was in the section where they were visiting Mr. Iddis and Mr. Jackal, and they were like preparing a body and talking about the work of caring for the dead, when I found out that my mother died. Oh. So that book, in a really weird way, kind of helped me deal with it. And I've reread it like 3 times, and I always find something fun in it and something good. And I think really one of the reasons I love Gaiman's work so much is his writing finds the beauty in the darkness. And like so many of his stories and his novels, they're grounded very firmly in the world that we live in. And then there's that feeling like maybe you just saw something out of the corner of your eye, but when you turn, it's not there anymore. He kind of likes, but if you could just focus on it, you get to see it. And some of his work kind of veers into that space that is kind of in between. And it's just so cool. And as a side note, now I recommend Stardust if nobody's ever read Gaiman because it's such a good fairy tale.
It's so sweet. It's lovely. Wendy,
Yes.
Speaking of fairy tales.
Yes. So I'm going to the first Gaiman book I actually read, which was Neverwhere. And after reading several Gaiman stories, I figured out what the real hook of the stories that he writes that I love the most is the liminal spaces, these characters that move in between 2 worlds. That would be, so Neverwhere, like major one, my top favorite. I got in when I worked at public library, I got into Sandman, and then realized that also takes that theme, not quite as obviously, but the character is moving in between worlds, but you don't see the portal, the entryway, whereas Neverwhere there's a doorway. And Oceans at the End of the Lane, there's this kind of, it's not really a border, but there's a space that they have to go between. Graveyard Book, there's a portal, so there's all these kind of moving in between worlds. It's just on the other side that you can't see. And that really hooks me in, and then of course his writing style is just so easy to just get absorbed into. And those are, I mentioned the other 2 because I know that they need to be mentioned. Ocean at the End of the Lane is actually a play in London now. Graveyard Book, I understand there was rumors that it was going to be picked up as a live action film.
Nice.
But I don't know if it actually got bought. This is pre-pandemic they were talking about it. So that would be brilliant. And more Gaiman and yeah. And speaking of mythos, Norse mythology.
It's so fun.
Mead Farts is my favorite story. if you haven't read Norse mythology and you are into like kind of mythos, but you haven't really gotten into Gaiman, that's probably the best gateway one because it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's basically him just kind of reinterpreting through his own voice a lot of the Norse stories.
Norse mythology, yeah.
It's super fun. And the way he writes Loki and Thor is just a delight. It's so funny.
Well, it's so clear he did his research before translating, but also before writing American Gods, because he has so much depth to his presentation of those in that collection, as well as just writing about them. So, did you want to tackle Sandman or come back around to that?
Well, I mentioned it, but no, Sandman I love because not only the liminal spaces and moving in between, but the character of Morpheus is not he's an anti-hero, right? Because he's not somebody that you're supposed to like. You're not supposed to identify with him. He has no idea what it's like to be human. And so as you start out, you're like, this is a creature, it's not a person, but as it goes on, you see that he's learning humanity over time. And I love that kind of story too.
And the thing that I love about that is that the one that's teaching him how to be more human is his sister Death. Because she spends the most time with humans.
And she is a hero.
Yeah, she is. She's beautiful.
Yeah. Jen?
So I don't have anything that new to add. Neverwhere was how I found Gaiman, and I think what really struck me was that I had this really physical reaction to reading it, to the point where I was almost in mourning at the end of the book because I didn't know what to do with it being done. And I think that's the sign of an author you need to keep reading.
Yeah.
And so then I read American Gods, and I remember how funny it was. There's like this scene with one of Odin's ravens, and he's like, say, nevermore or whatever. He's like, fuck you. That's my favorite scene. It's so good. It's so good. And I just thought, how can you give so much humanity and humor and life to these untouchable gods? Like, it was just amazing to me. And then Good Omens. I remember reading Good Omens at my dad's house, and he was like, what is wrong with you? Because I was belly laughing to the point where I almost peed my pants. I'm not even lying. Really, seriously, there could have been a few drops. And he was like, what is wrong with you? And I start reading him these passages, and he's like, are you okay? Because I could barely get through them. I was laughing so hard. And I think Gaiman's humor, his humanity, it's just amazing to me. So I'm in love.
Yeah. That was sort of my experience with Good Omen, because Jason laughed so much. And when he was done, he's like, you should read this. Just read this next.
It's glorious.
Yeah. And I laughed until it hurts.
I mean, seriously, raise your hand if you remember reading a Gaiman passage where you just laughed your head off. Yeah, right? They're funny. So good. Yeah.
Well, and the combo with Pratchett.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the gift. This is so good. So speaking of Good Omens, this is a great way for us to seg to the other part of this discussion, because with Gaiman, it isn't only just his written word. It's never just been the static word on the page for him. He has so many adaptations. And earlier today, we were talking about a golden age of Star Trek. Well, now I think we can talk about a golden age of Gaiman on the screen, because there's so many amazing.
Well, in media, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the audio for Sandman.
Yeah. Yes, the whole thing, the Sandman. So our first adaptation that we're going to chat about is American Gods. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of a bumpy ride of an adaptation.
It really is. Season 1, I thought, was really pretty solid. They made some deviations, but it was like, well, all right.
Not too important.
I understand that things aren't going to be the same. And it was still really, I thought it was still really enjoyable.
Yeah.
And just as like Orlando Jones was perfect,
Oh my gosh.
absolutely perfect as a Nazi,
Yes.
and like just chef's kiss. Like that, the show was just amazingly cast.
Yeah.
And then season 2 happened, and there was more deviations that were not my favorite. But there was also deviations that I thought were really, really good, because Bilquis actually got to live. And not only did she live, she met up with Anansi and Mr. Ibis up in Illinois, and they started to gather people to them and all that, and it was so good. Such good acting and such good storytelling, and the only thing that, like, it seems like a weird thing to focus in on, but, like, the one thing I did not like at all with the adaptation is that they changed how Shadow and Laura met.
That was a terrible change.
Like, because in the show, she's working at a casino, and that's how she meets him, and when that happened, I try really hard not to be that person when we watch adaptations of things that we've read. But while we were watching, I just went, what? Why did they do this? This is wrong. Because in the book, they meet at a party. They're introduced by friends. And they've been like drinking together. And I wrote this quote down because like at the end, kind of the end of the chapter, you Shadow's monologue, and he's thinking about the night, and he's thinking about Laura, and it says he had kissed her goodnight that night, and she had tasted like strawberry daiquiris, and he had never wanted to kiss anyone else again. And instead, they changed it so she worked in a fucking casino. And he met because she was a dealer, and I think there was some weird crime going on. And I was like, ugh.
Yeah, and we lost the whole puppy thing too, and just like there was a lot of sweetness got lost, and I think that sweetness for me really propelled a lot of what went on with Laura in the story, and also really ultimately in the book, and like also sort of motivated Shadow to survive some things, and without that sweetness, it lost a little bit of its, you know, the moral compass. I hate to use that, but like the emotional thread that kept us going through the story.
Right, that made you care.
Yeah, there were times that it felt like the showrunners went, "We're on Stars. Where's the buckets of blood?" Because there were some scenes that were just so much more brutal than they really needed.
I didn't know that happened, but it wasn't like that.
Yeah. Do any of you know how involved? Because I know Neil was very involved in the Romans, and he was very involved in the development of the Sandman.
He was not as involved.
Yeah, and I think that affected what came after.
And I think that I don't remember if he's ever actually said anything, because he seems to be someone who tries to be very circumspect in how he talks about things. But I don't know, there's been some things he said over the last few years that kind of made it sound like, well, I've learned some lessons.
Yeah.
I might not be the only one, or I may be the only one that feels this way, but I didn't really like the adaptation. I had friends who I talked about American Gods to forever, and they hadn't read the book yet, and they started watching the show, and they're like, it's visually appealing, but I have no idea what's going on.
I had another friend who hated it.
Yeah, and I felt like it did a disservice to the book, because people couldn't get into it, and it didn't have that humanity. It didn't have like the relationship you said with Laura. It just didn't.
They made a season 3, but I never watched it.
No, I didn't either.
Well, and then they just dropped it.
Yeah.
They
just
finish.
went off
just in the
into
middle
some
of-
other
There was so
realm. It
much
wasn't-
drama behind the scenes that it hurt the show.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot with like, my understanding is Orlando Jones really tried to save things as best he could, and they were like, no. You're getting way too into this whole like racism thing. And he's like, have you read the news? Do you see who I am? No, like, just look at me. And have you looked at this cast? Yeah, like, this is personal for us. Of course, we're going to like reevaluate some of this story through our lens, and it brings richness to the story. And I agree with him on that point. Like, he was making some good changes. But then there was this whole, like, buckets of blood and, like, let's remove some of the sweetness. And it's not my favorite adaptation. I was, like, ready to go with it at season 1, but season 2 really lost me.
Well, like, I also just to mention Stardust one last time. That adaptation is super fun. Because it's also the first time I ever saw Charlie Cox in anything.
Oh.
You know, Marvel's Daredevil. And he's so sweet in this.
So
and Claire
good.
Danes is the star that falls. And it's funny, too, because it's one of those movies where they cast someone in the lead role on purpose who is basically unknown.
Yeah.
So there would be no expectations on the character. And then there's all these really famous people in just these different parts sprinkled throughout, and Michelle Pfeiffer is the evil witch.
Oh, so good. So good.
But it's a really good fairy tale, and it's like if you've never seen the movie, but like maybe you like Princess Bride or something, yeah, it's probably a good movie.
You
to
like
check out.
Stardust, yeah.
Wendy, did you have any thoughts on the American Gods adaptation?
I did not like it.
Yeah.
No, I'm one of those people that I was just, I can't get into this. This is nothing like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I, you know, after talking to people that did enjoy it or got through it all the way, that I might sit down and watch it again with a different eye. But that was the first time that anything that was Gaiman that I was just like, I can't
Yeah.
get through this.
Yes.
I have a point on that. I think the reason I was able to watch the show is because I couldn't really remember the book.
Yeah. That might help.
Right.
in
So
this
if you
case.
go in with no expectations, it's
Yeah.
a little different.
Yeah.
Why did they remove the three sisters of Chernobyl? I don't understand.
Oh man, I love the sisters.
I
right?
too. And that there weren't three sisters anymore.
Yeah.
And it was like, this isn't as magical now.
Well,
Yeah.
I feel like the big thing.
Also-
Oh, sorry, Jen.
No, I was just agreeing with her. It didn't feel as magical.
Yeah. So I think overall, the changes I saw that didn't work for me were the ones where they were like, we're going to cut out this part that gives us emotional resonance
Yeah.
and humanity, and we're going to like focus on the sort of like violence, despair, bloodshed. I'm like, where's the Gaiman?
Yeah.
Gaiman for me is in that emotional resonance.
Yeah.
Speaking of emotional resonance, Good Omens.
Good Omens.
Good. Let's talk about something that has plenty of
Yeah.
Gaiman in it.
Yeah.
In the Gaiman adaptation,
Since he's the like co-showrunner.
right? And I think he really took this as a very special project because Sarteri is dead, because it was left in his care. He went to the extreme to make sure it was really just beautiful. So I can't remember if we started here or with Jen on the last adaptation and moved down this way.
I don't remember. Jen started.
Jen?
All right.
Yeah.
I loved it. Obviously, not just the book. I love the adaptation. I thought when we start out and they're in the garden and they're on the wall and it starts raining and he puts the feather over, I was done for. You know, I was done for. And again, the humor shone through, and I think they couldn't have had a better cast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that's what really made it. And you know, I think Good Omens is a love story. However you try to talk about what kind of love it is, it's a love story, right? Between these two people, beings, not people,
Yeah.
two beings that have gone through history together. And I thought it was so beautifully done. And I'll pass it on to you because I know we've nerded out about this so many times.
We've talked about Good Omens together extensively.
Extensively.
We love it so much. He's like, there's so much, because I know there's a lot of discourse about it being, them being like, and more of a romantic rather than a platonic relationship. And that's not something that ever occurred to me when I was reading it. And I don't think it occurred to me until there was some point like halfway through watching season 1 where I was like, and I think part of it, and then I read a really good article about it, and someone who talked about that. And then I was reading through what their thoughts and then thinking about what I watched. I'm like, oh, because there's the scene in the car where Crowley basically is trying to find a way to die, and he's doing all this stuff. And Aziraphale the way Aziraphale says it, because Michael Sheen is a gift, was just, you move too fast for me, Crowley. Yeah. And it's like,
And we had talked about how it had gotten backlash, right? Because they felt like they didn't make the relationship overt enough. But we were talking with friends, and I don't remember who brought it up, but of it being this beautiful ace relationship, because they're not, I mean, they don't have cards, right? But it doesn't make it any less romantic.
Yeah.
Right?
And
more committed.
And, Gaiman is quite active on social media, and when people kind of gave backlash on that, he doubled down in season 2 with this this ace being relationship, and it's not just Crowley and
Right.
So,
Yeah. So
Beautiful.
it's such a good adaptation, and there's so many good, like, kind of things where you listen to it's like some of my favorite kinds of stories are the stories where like humanity is being looked at by somebody else.
Yeah.
And then they like say the things out loud that we're all bad at as like a general sort of human beings. Like whenever there's about to be some sort of war, and Crowley and Aziraphale observing, and Crowley's like, what do you say to him? And Aziraphale's, well, he said be kind to each other. And Crowley's like, oh yeah, I don't like that.
There are so many hard truths in that book, and
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of them come from Pratchett, actually.
Yeah.
But there are still Gaiman ones in there where you're like, oh, that one
It's
hits.
like, I mean, Discworld, one of the whole things of Discworld is that like biting social commentary without punching down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So.
and Good Omens was the first Pratchett I ever read.
Yeah.
Was it?
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
mine too.
Oh, I mean, I came to Pratchett before I came to Gaiman. And so I picked Good Omens up because I was like, oh, Pratchett, I need it. I gotta consume it all. I love Pratchett deeply.
But because I had read so much of Neil Gaiman's work, I could kind of tell where those voices, and I was like, I like this other voice.
Yeah.
And so that got me into Pratchett.
I think they both are masters of plumbing humanity.
Yeah.
And like in a poetic, kind,
Humorous.
generous, and humorous way. Like
Yeah.
they're like I have a hard time reading Pratchett now because I am so oh God, I'm crying. I'm so sad about his passing. It was really hard as a longtime fan. And so gosh, pardon me. Watching Good Omens, I also felt myself like experiencing this transcendent love story and grieving an artist that I've loved. So pardon me. I don't normally start sobbing on panels about books, but I am a book nerd. So there's this sort of like beauty to how generous they are, and it always made me feel like reading either Gaiman or Pratchett, like we can see that things are hard, we can see the flawed quality, we can see that humanity is really on the brink constantly of destroying ourselves. And they're like, yeah, here's the mirror, but also like, you guys are gonna do it. Look at these things you do. Look at these ways you transcend that are surprising. And that is like part of the power of the Good Omens adaptation to me, because they don't lose that in the translation. And in fact, Gaiman managed to like go, yeah, that part, that's the really important part. So I want to make sure to like polish it up for you. And especially like having it delivered in the time that it was delivered to us. I was like, thanks, I was drowning. I really appreciate this lifeline. So, pardon me. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's one of the best book adaptations from a book that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, seasons 2 and assuming they actually greenlighted season 3 are obviously off book. And I've seen people complain of, like, criticize that, but it's like, the two of them always planned a sequel. They just never got around to writing it.
Well, and they've gotten flack about casting too, because, you know, when you read a story, especially if you have a genderless character, people kind of envision one or the other in a lot of binary in a lot of ways. And you know, he has said in interviews, these characters are supposed to be non-binary. They're supernatural beings. They can't fit this. So getting flack, and he got flack for that on Sandman too.
Yeah,
he did.
Getting flack for having an actress as a character that other people as Beelzebub. People just assumed Beelzebub would be male and masculine and tough and big and scary, and it was this smaller, very intimidating, terrifying individual that people, and I don't know if the actor is non-binary, so I shouldn't say, but the assumption was you put a woman in a man's role, and he got a lot of flack for that.
Well, it was a more femme person, for sure.
Yeah, and people were mad that Frances McDormand was God.
Yeah.
It's not for them.
Right.
So those
Exactly.
people that
It's not
hate
for
it,
them.
they should just ignore it because it's not for them.
Right.
Thank you, Diana.
I basically said that in the last panel.
Yeah, you did.
Like things that, if there's something in a genre, in a world that you don't like, you can either like withdraw. You're like, you know, stop, take a breath, and say, well, maybe I should kind of have an open mind, and I'll see how this goes. And if you can't do that, then maybe just walk away.
You know, one of the things about the Good Omens cinematic version is that I really love is in the costume design how many times Crowley is a woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you're just watching and you're not watching for it, it may not click except when he's the nanny.
Yeah.
But they're from a historian perspective, when they're back in, you know, early Middle East era, the clothing that Crowley is wearing is women's clothing.
Yeah.
Huh.
So yeah, it's really interesting how they were like, okay, well, was Crowley a woman in this time? And you know, because they
Crowley's
were
an angel.
right.
Angels don't
right, but
have to-
presenting to the public as right.
Yeah.
And that was that. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. That and they didn't try to change actors or faces.
Yeah.
It was just the clothing.
Well, and the actors played it in a way that was like,
Oh, the brilliant actors.
yeah. So
Yeah. And like Michael Sheen, it's funny because the whole thing with, okay, the official ship name for Crowley and Aziraphale is Ineffable Husbands.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when they went into it, from things that I've read, they weren't really sure what kind of exactly the vibe was going to be with the relationship. And at some point, Michael Sheen just started playing it that way. And David Tennant was like, okay.
Well, they had been in films before and became very good friends.
And there is, to your point about like presenting as women in different places, there is probably, like, I guess, I don't know, would it be fair to call it like a subgenre of fan art? Of them
Oh yeah.
that people refer to as ineffable wives, where they're both drawn as women. And it's delightful. Which, P.S., if you have some time to spend and you just want to go out there on the internet and look for it, there is so much good, really excellent Good Omens fan art.
Just be careful with your search words.
yeah,
Because
maybe,
there's that kind of fan art too.
maybe open up one of those browser windows that's like
Incognito.
So I don't really want to wrap up this Good Omens conversation, and it makes me feel like we need a Good Omens panel next year.
We could do that again.
Because we could go longer, but we only have a little bit of time left. And we should maybe touch on the Sandman adaptation. I don't think we're going to have time to talk about the movies, to be honest.
No.
So just know we wanted to talk about everything, but it is Neil Gaiman, and we love his work. So
Before we get into Sandman, I want to say there's rumor that there will be a live action Coraline.
Oh, cool.
heck
So-
yes.
That's
Yes.
rumored. I don't know much more about it. I just read a, In Talks article. But, okay, Sandman.
Sandman. Tanya, I feel like as our Wednesday Addams, I am wearing skeleton hands, so we brought some goth vibes, girl. But like, maybe you should start us off with a
We're all
little.
in black.
We are. Oh, good job, team. Yeah. Came for the gaming.
Yeah, this Stardust, Sandman. I knew it was graphic novels, and I knew but I had never read them because I came very late to comics in general. But then somebody was like, "You've never read Sandman?" I'm like, "Fine," but it was really good, really good. But it's just a lot. And, and sometimes the library doesn't always have it. And anyway, I made it a certain way through, and I really loved it, but I hadn't picked it back up. And then Audible decided to adapt it as a fully cast audio drama, with sound effects and all. And the casting was brilliant. James McAvoy is Morpheus. Kat Dennings is Death. I don't remember some of the other people in it, but they're all amazing. And I had an Audible, and I was like, I have an Audible membership. And so they released them as Act 1, and then Act 2, and Act 3.
They're so good.
And they're all amazing. And now the Audible adaptation, it is just like a straight from comic to audio adaptation. There are no changes.
It's brilliant.
So if you decide to go out and consume this, be aware there are some things that may become triggering about things because these were written in the early 90s. And so there's maybe some different takes on transness and queer and all sorts of other things. But it's still good storytelling.
Yeah.
And that heart is still there in all these characters and beings. And yeah, it's just real good. And then I got even more excited when Netflix said they were adapting stuff. And the thing about Gaiman being outspoken to people who come for him on social media, people were complaining that the amazing Gwendolyn Christie was cast as Lucifer.
Yep.
So?
And they thought that Lucifer should be a man. And so one of the things Gaiman said, Gaiman just baited this person at first, and they were like, he's like, why? Is she too tall? And then they said something else, and he brought up genitalia, and he was like, well, Lucifer doesn't have that, right?
Well, and it was the same with Death.
Yeah.
And they had this vision of what Death was supposed
Because
to look like.
in the graphic novel,
Right.
that character was based off some a girl that he had
Right.
met and interacted with, I believe a singer or something.
She was like a performer.
Essentially a performer that he had seen, and he thought,
artist.
yeah, but she's very pale and gothy, and yeah.
Her name was Cinnamon Hayes.
Yeah. She just passed away, didn't she?
I don't, not too recently, but she is gone.
So and I think that's the problem with doing film adaptation from a graphic novel, is you've already got this preconceived notion, not just in your head, where you can kind of argue, well, maybe I imagined it differently, but somebody's already drawn it. And I think that's where it ran into trouble, and he's like, Death can look like whomever she wants to look like. Right? And the actress that, I can't remember her name.
Herbie Baptiste.
So good.
So good.
I think one of the smartest things they did when they were marketing it was release that clip
Yeah.
where she goes to get the violinist.
The scene of the violinist had me bawling.
Oh
Yeah.
my god, I've already cried once.
And the funny,
But the when you do film adaptation of something that also has very graphic scenes, like The Diner, they did back off on that because there were some themes that in the graphic novel, if you've not read it, be prepared. There's some sexual and violent themes in some of these things that they kind of pull back on. It's still pretty graphic, but the you still get the rawness and the insanity of it without having all of that other
The exact opposite of American Gods.
Yeah, they took it out, but they tried to keep the feel of it.
Right.
Almost like it matters whenever the creator
Right.
is involved.
Right. It really
Right.
does.
They did. I thought it was really, really well done. Basically.
Oh yeah, that was because when we were watching the Sandman adaptation, and I would see the episode titles come up, and I saw the episode title 24 Hours, and I went, oh no.
Here it comes.
So my husband has not read the graphic novels. He's not read these things. So we watched that first season, and I'm sitting there going, when are they going to show this? Not realizing that they stop before they get to the next act, right? I'm thinking they're going to keep going, but not, because my brain didn't connect. This is just the first season, right?
Yeah.
So they did act 1 in the first season. So yeah, it's this. It is. It's almost like we're in intermission right now. That's all.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
One of the,
I want to see if they cast some of the gods based on the voice actors.
I hope
Because I
they do.
love that.
I hope
David
the person
Tennant
who-
would be amazing.
I hope the person who voices Delirium gets to play her.
Yes.
And, yeah, it's just so well done. There's obviously so much care that's gone into producing it. And to the point of like poking at the haters, there have been character posters released, and there's one where the actress is deaf. Because there's actually like it's a panel from the comics where she has sunglasses and she's being very playful. And somebody took that character poster where she's doing that and she's got a smile, and then they memed it to say "Die mad about it." I was like, nice. But yeah, it's just there's so much good stuff.
It's really a stunning adaptation, and it did, between Good Omens and Sandman, I feel like we really have been treated to some incredible adaptations of his
In the
work.
first season of American God.
And the first season, that first season. And we've got the movies, which we don't have time to talk about, but we have like 3 minutes to take questions.
Yeah.
And EK, you have been a champ. I just thank you with all my heart. Normally I live stream all my panels so you can see them later, or if you're unable to attend a convention, you can enjoy them. The Wi-Fi is really rough here. EK has been so kind. Thank you very much. Thank you. Don't even, we're gonna release this into the universe with American Gods. So, that was shady. Do we have any questions?
Or comments? Or what are some of your
Yeah,
favorites?
we have 3 minutes. No, you're just all like, yeah, that was good.
I just say whatever I'm going to
Are
say.
there any that we
No,
haven't
you're
mentioned
perfect.
that popped into your head? It's like, hey, why aren't you talking about this one? Because there are so many.
Yeah.
Oh, Mirror Mask. I completely forgot you wrote Mirror Mask.
Well, and
We didn't
I
get to movies, so.
and I wanted to talk about the Neverwhere
Right.
miniseries, which actually came. The miniseries happened before the book,
And Peter Capaldi is in it too.
right? He's great, and I.
Wasn't there an audio, radio?
Yes. BBC Radio has done adaptations of Neverwhere, of I believe they've done American Gods.
It's definitely better than the second season.
I just thought of something. Did you guys see the little blurbs on, I guess, YouTube and Facebook and David Tennant and Michael Sheen during the pandemic would have
Yes.
this little.
Oh.
It was like it helped me so much.
They're really
I
great.
would read them or watch them again and again. They were so charming.
I'm sorry, but I was going to say they started doing more of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
that's
new
neat.
ones.
And the wives are involved, and
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
yeah, it's hilarious.
It
What
is
they
so
did, what she's talking about is they had little Zoom. They recorded little Zoom interactions, and I swear they sound like an old married couple. And the wives are like, yeah, okay, we got it, you know.
The wives say that too. Yeah. So anyway, in summation, as a conclusion, would you guys like to say a couple of last things as we're wrapping up?
We're all complete for us.
Yeah, just that really Neil Gaiman's work is so broad and so varied. Like, for example, real quick, if you like horror, maybe pick up one of his anthologies. Because I recently finished his anthology, Fragile Things, and there are some deeply disturbing things in that book. But it's all good.
I just want to say everything I hear about him as a person, like we talk about this down the road with J.K. Rowling. I mean, it's really hard sometimes to separate the artist from their art, right? And everything I hear about Gaiman as a person just makes me love reading him more, because I remember you telling me about a story about going to a signing for Gaiman, and wasn't there somebody just ahead of you who was telling him about writing, and he like hugged her and told her to keep writing?
I don't remember that. I remember...
There was somebody I talked to that happened where I thought it was you, but it was a friend of mine who went. I didn't get to go to it. Gaiman was up in Phoenix, and this person was just saying how influential he was on her, and she was a writer, and she was feeling, kind of down about it, and he hugged her. He took time to hug her and tell her to keep trying. That was just like...
I do know the signing that I went to, I read about it later. There had been a woman who was in just a beautiful costume with a fascinator that was somehow on theme, and they talked while he signed her books, and I think he either gave her a hug or a handshake or something like that, because something something about how being a beautiful fascinator deserves extra attention or something. It was very sweet.
Better than Paul Hollywood.
Sorry.
So, thank you all for being with us. We are back this evening with 2 more panels. The Rhoynish Turtle Conservation Society, the Hut Slayer contingent, and me.
You're a turtle.
I'm a turtle. too. Thank you all so much. And by the way, Creative Play Podcast is right here and was recording the panel because you're a mensch and I love you. And you can find Jim's stuff on Patreon and social medias, but you should really be backing his Patreon so he'll keep recording our panels. Don't. No, I'm an artist. Don't. All right, thank you so much. We're going to get out of here.
I thought I cried a lot.
Oh my gosh, I don't.
Win the medal.
Thank you. I can't believe it. I was just like, let me.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play-In Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, please check out D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Ragnarok Enroll a Scion Hero to Ragnarok Story. Also, check out our Patreon page for more content and behind-the-scenes things, as well as joining us for a one-shot game or two.